People are very quick to think about everything that go wrong with housing, but they don't think about everything that goes right. It is really easy to solve single-handedly with your own personal decisions all the complaints people have about new constructions. Like, it'll cause traffic, parking problems, this, that, noise. It's really easy to get around all that. Just move to the middle of nowhere, and then you won't have any traffic or parking or noise problems. People are thinking, well, this is a very snide remark. No. I'm not trying to be snide. I'm not trying to antagonize people. I'm making a deeper point here, which is, look, there's a reason why people don't do what I'm saying. People want to live near other people. And when you live near other people, what do? You get a package. You get a bunch of bad things, and you also get a bunch of good things. And when we look at people's behavior, it is clear most people greatly prefer the package of all the good and all the bad that having a lot of neighbors brings to the package of none of the good and none of the bad. And that is where you really realize government is strangling an industry where, on balance, it's actually good for the neighbors and not just for the people getting the housing. So crazy.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Glick. Before we get into today's episode, just really quick, today is a very special milestone for us. This is episode number 100, and we wouldn't be here today with the show making it this far to this milestone without all of your support. All of you have been listening in, whether you've been listening in from the beginning or you joined along the way at some point. Just super grateful for all of your support and helping us, get to the next milestone, which whatever that is, 150, 200, but really, really excited to make it to episode 100 here. And we have a really good conversation for you today. So in this episode, I recorded a conversation with Bryan Caplan. Bryan is the professor of economics at George Mason University and a New York Times bestselling author, including the author of a book we're going to dig into during this episode called Build, Baby, Build, The Science and Ethics of Housing Regulation. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into our conversation with Bryan. Before we jump into some of the housing topics that are covered in your book, Build, Baby, Build, I guess I first want to get your thoughts on two different things. Number one is the reason you wrote the book in the first place, and then also the style that you chose to write the book in as kind of a graphic nonfiction book.
The reason I wrote the book is I just started reading a lot of research saying that housing regulation was incredibly strict and doing a lot of damage. I'm an economist, and I try to go and talk about issues that are quantitatively important. If you watch the news, it's about symbolism, right? Jeffrey Epstein, all right, how does this actually affect your life? I want to go and find the trillion-dollar problems. That's why I'm on the lookout for things like this. And I looked at housing, and this looks like a multi-trillion-dollar problem. It's something where we have suffocating regulation that is preventing an enormous amount of construction that otherwise occur, construction that people really are very badly want to need. In terms of why I did it as a graphic novel, a couple of reasons. So this is my second graphic novel. My first one, Open Borders, was really successful. It was a New York Times bestseller. It's a very fun process. And it also showed me this is a great way to take a topic where there's very important research that is incredibly boring for almost any person to read or hear about and get people to pay attention. All right, look, I'm just going to be the first to admit, I know you said that a lot of your listeners are housing wonks, so maybe housing just keeps you up at night with its incredible, fascinating power. But for most people, that is not true. Most people find the topic dull. Most people would never imagine even reading the research. I've read the research. I wanted to go and present all the research in a way that's fair and accurate, but also much more entertaining than the original research, so I can just blow people away with what an important topic is. As to whether I succeeded, you've got to shell out your money and buy the book to decide.
You know, I was kind of thinking about how to approach this topic and how best to walk through it. And the more I thought about it, I thought it would be interesting to kind of start with the end and kind of work back through some of the problems. And so as you think about the housing problems that exist today, and I know those listening in can pick up a copy of the book to dig into maybe things even in more detail and everything. But when you think about the solution, so you have the paintbrush to decide how things should be set up. Where's your head at? Like, what do you think?
I mean, my dream world is buy right construction. Right. So that's something that already exists in certain narrow areas. And I think that is the best system. I know of all the objections. I know of all the problems, and all things considered, I still think buy right is the best. A system where if you're the property owner, you decide what to build. And if someone doesn't like it, they have to take you to court and prove physical harm.
So do you think that, like, where do you think people get it wrong? Like when they're looking at housing, where are they coming from? Is it a bureaucratic issue, or is it a citizen issue where they don't necessarily even know?
I think that the fundamental issue is the average voter, and then the bureaucracy. A lot of it, they're responding to the average voter, and a lot of it is they're just going and doing what they think the average voter would want if they were paying more attention. What's going wrong in people's heads? This is such a big question. Maybe want to break it into smaller ones, but I would just start with a lot of people just refuse to believe that heavy regulation of housing raises the price of housing. You might say, look, it's got to, isn't that common sense? Well, I've got some quite striking public opinion surveys where you just ask people, if you let developers build a lot more housing, what will happen to the price of housing? And it's roughly a third of people say prices will go down. A third say they say the same, and a third say they'll go up. So it's like, if that's your view of the world, then I understand why 2/3 of people don't mind regulation, because they just don't think there's any connection between the amount of housing that's getting built and its price, right? Which is a crazy thing to think, but it's a widespread view. Another part is unrealistic pessimism about how bad it will be to let people build stuff. It's common to just go completely off the rails when someone's building new houses. Say, like, traffic's going to be terrible. It's like, maybe it'll be 2% worse. That's not terrible. I still remember when I was a kid, there was a new development that was approved near my house, and my dad was furious, talking about how hell would rain down upon us. And a few years later, he just forgot he ever even had the complaints because they didn't happen. And it was just barely even noticeable, a drop in the bucket. Another level is a lot of things people complain about with housing. They're just way cheaper and more humane solutions than preventing construction. So, for example, if you're worried about there being more traffic, how about charge people to drive during peak times? I know it's not a popular idea, but it's much better to pay a bit more for driving and then have cheap housing than what we got right now, where housing's through the roof and you are legally free to drive at any time. Although if there's a traffic jam, you're kind of stuck. And then finally, this in a way is maybe the deepest point. People are very quick to think about everything that go wrong with housing, but they don't think about everything that goes right. It is really easy to solve single-handedly with your own personal decisions all the complaints people have about new constructions. Like, it'll cause traffic, parking problems, this, that, noise. It's really easy to get around all that. Just move to the middle of nowhere, and then you won't have any traffic or parking or noise problems. People are thinking, well, this is a very snide remark. No. I'm not trying to be snide. I'm not trying to antagonize people. I'm making a deeper point here, which is, look, there's a reason why people don't do what I'm saying. People want to live near other people. And when you live near other people, what do? You get a package. You get a bunch of bad things, and you also get a bunch of good things. And when we look at people's behavior, it is clear most people greatly prefer the package of all the good and all the bad that having a lot of neighbors brings to the package of none of the good and none of the bad. And that is where you really realize government is strangling an industry where, on balance, it's actually good for the neighbors and not just for the people getting the housing. So crazy.
Yeah. Do you think it's from a individual standpoint? Do you think most people are thinking about themselves only when they kind of raise their hand and say, hey, I don't agree with this? Or do you think many of them are actually looking at the community as a whole?
I think that they are taking a very distorted look at the community as a whole, right? I mean, in a way, I would much prefer a world where everyone just voted for their narrow self-interest, because you can deal with people like that. How? It's like, look, I refuse to support this because it's going to be bad for my property values. It's like, all right, what's the harm of the property values? $20,000. All right, here's $21,000. And now you're on board with me, right? That would be a much better world than the world we're in. The world we're in is much more of like, I don't want your filthy money. There's a bird's nest at stake. That's what's actually generally happening. So, and this is my view of politics generally. It's not the problem is not really that people are voting selfishly. The problem is that they have a big philosophy that is very poorly thought out, where there's hyper emphasis upon low probability, minor problems that people blow out of proportion. And almost total neglect of the enormous opportunities for progress.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about the kind of the zoning as being one of the
Sure.
things of it, right? So you have cities like Houston that they don't have zoning. You
Yep.
have most other cities do have zoning, and
Sure.
it and I'm curious your thoughts on this because zoning is an interesting thing in my mind where you have certain situations where now we have so many data centers going up, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people have concerns around those data centers being put too close to their housing and things of that
Mm-hmm.
nature. What are your
I
thoughts
haven't even
on?
heard this complaint yet. I've heard a lot of
Oh
complaints.
yeah, oh
People are
yeah,
getting worried about data centers.
yes,
What do data
yes,
centers do that's so terrible?
yeah. They're worried about data centers and
Which do what?
pollution or usage of all the water in their area and things of that nature because they're
So
high
it's just
consumption
that they're
water.
worried that there's going to be people that work at the data center and drink water, or is it use water to cool the data centers? I like
Yeah, yeah.
so
That's the thing.
right. Again, this is a case where it's like if that's the worry, how about we raise the price of water? I don't know. Where are you podcasting out of, by the way?
I'm out of Des Moines, Iowa.
Des Moines, Iowa. All right. So I'm from California, where they're always belly aching about water shortages. And once you learn some economics, it's like, how about you raise the price of water? Why don't you do that? That will solve the problem. And of course, Californians are some of the most stubborn people in the world. And you could go and give them the cure for cancer, and they'll sit there saying, well, why should I do it? It's like, because you have cancer and it will cure your cancer. Like, well, but all right. My apology. If any of your listeners are from California, you know what I'm talking about. Californians think
Yeah,
they know it all. What do they
right,
know?
right. Well, I mean, obviously from your stance and everything in the book and just what you said at the outset of our conversation, I mean, essentially zoning is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Zoning, without zoning, we can solve a lot of the problems. And I assume
Right.
that's kind of where
Yes.
your head's at. Yeah.
So, of course, if you're a lawyer, then zoning is only one kind of housing regulation. So, zoning normally refers to separation of uses, which I think is a problem, but I don't think it's as severe of a problem as regulation of building height. A minimum lot size is actually a huge one, saying you have to have an acre of land or 2 acres or 5 acres of land per new house. That is something that obviously greatly strangles the supply of housing. So that would not normally get classified quite as zoning, but it's all in this general category of draconian regulation of this vital industry that is really the second most vital industry for humanity after food itself.
Yeah, what's funny about that is I had a conversation with a guy from he's a broker out in New York, and he was talking about some of a developer he was working with who was building a building, and they have certain restrictions on the width of these buildings, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they couldn't build them, smaller than a certain size, and so you had just weird
Smaller than a
things.
certain size or larger than a certain
It
size?
was well, it was like I don't know what they call. I can't remember the term off the top of my head. It was
Mm-hmm.
almost like these needle buildings or something where
Yes.
they're
Oh,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
very
I know. Now I
skinny.
know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. And so you'd get developers having to like work around these restrictions to
Hmm.
doing things that weren't necessarily in the best interest of the consumer, but
Mm-hmm.
they had to do it. And
Yep.
yeah, it's just really
Sure.
bizarre. Another thing, so NIMBYism is obviously a thing, not in my backyard. And there's been a
Right.
big movement lately, and I think it started out in California where you have more
Mm-hmm.
of like yes in my backyard, and
Yes.
you've got a movement on that. Do you have any thoughts on where you've seen that going? Do you think that has any legs?
Yeah, it's got some legs. They're getting stuff done and more than I would have expected 5 years ago. Definitely. The thing to note is that usually YIMBY movements are important in places that are terrible. So you basically start in the places that have the very worst regulation. And then sometimes, not usually, but sometimes you get a oppositional movement that says things are crazy and it's too hard to build stuff and it's not fair. And those are the YIMBY movements. The places that actually have the lowest regulation usually don't have a YIMBY movement because things just aren't that bad and they're like, and people can just build stuff. So normally it is reactive. The most notable example recently is that California has apparently greatly reduced the strictness of environmental review for new construction, and explicitly on these YIMBY grounds. You always have to be cautious before you proclaim that the regulation is going to do its magic, as often the laws are so complicated. There's actually 27 different laws that are the problem, and you got to get rid of all of them before you see the progress, but hopeful anyway.
Yeah, well, on that point of all the different laws, it seems like the industry very much goes after one or two. They're just like
Mm-hmm.
inching and inching. They don't
Yes.
they don't go after everything necessarily.
Right.
Do you think that's a problem? Do you think they should be more
Mm-hmm.
bold in their approach, or do you think taking the longer approach of, well, we got to do one thing at a time to get there?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's one where I am not confident, but my instinct just says that the usual thing in housing regulation is that most developers just want to go and talk to local politicians to get an exception for themselves,
Right.
get a variance. And I totally understand why that's a good business model. It's like, why should I fight it out for everybody? But if you want to go and get actual progress, if you're a business that is a large part of your local market, if you're influential, if you're a leader, this is where it really does make sense to stick up for yourselves and say, look, why are we treated like criminals? We're providing a vital product. It's like, we're not like heroin sellers where you can say like what kind of people would do it. We're just building houses for people to live in. Why are we bad guys? Why do you look at us as if we're like we are so likely to mess things up that you've got to keep us in a straitjacket? I think that kind of forthrightness from the people who are leaders, I think there's value in that. And obviously you don't want to say it in a way that antagonizes others, but just to say, look, I am proud to be a builder. I'm proud to be a developer. You can go and make us the bad guys in movies, but in real life, we are good people doing good things for other people. Why are you mad at us? You shouldn't be mad at us. If anything, we should be mad at you because you get in the way of us doing our jobs, but just go and get out of the way and we'll just let bygones be bygones. I think that's a pretty good pitch.
Episode number 100 is brought to you by Groove. Many of you already know Groove as a land acquisition platform, but what you may not know is that Groove also offers a lot management solution. You can keep track of your lot inventory status, whether it's for sale, under contract, or sold, and even embed an interactive map on your website that shows buyers what's available. That map updates in real time whenever you make changes to pricing or status. So if you're a land developer and want to take a closer look, head over to letsgroove.com/demo to schedule a demo today. That is letsgroov.com/demo. All right, let's get back to the show. Well, I also think that one of the challenges with this is the political side of things. And so you have, it seems like certain sides of the aisle fall on certain sides of the argument related to development. And so obviously every 4 years, or depending on what they are, you're going to get a different person in there. So if you're trying to inch your way, it seems like when the political scene changes, now it goes back the other direction. And the politicians are thinking a lot of re-election, right? So they're just thinking about what are my constituents going to say? Are they going to vote me out if I go this direction, and things of that nature? And so that seems like one of those battles that is truly challenging. And I don't know how that gets pointed the right direction.
Right. So you're sort of talking about a situation where local government is pretty competitive and there's alternation of power between parties. A lot of local governments, maybe even most, are one party. And in that case, what I would say is focus on the kinds of deregulation that members of that party are most sympathetic to anyway. So yeah, if you're going and pitching to a Democratic city council, that's where I would say, look, this is a city. We should be able to have tall buildings. We should be able to have dense construction. We shouldn't have to go and provide parking for everybody. Let that be something, let people build a parking garage if they want to park their car. On the other hand, if you're talking to a suburban Republican council, that would be where you would say, look, let's go and let landowners go and build a bunch of single family homes. Why should it have to be an acre or 5 acres for every home? Why can't we just let people build all the single family homes they want? And again, I think that's another one where it doesn't mean that you're in favor of the other stuff, but just push the stuff that's likely to go over well, because that's where you're likely to get the wins.
Yeah, well, you bring up a good point about local politics. I'm curious your thoughts on, we have the federal government, we have the state, and we have the local, and you have, federals trying to overreach into telling the state and the local what to do. The state's trying to tell the local what to do. Texas had some bills this last legislative session where they essentially put some laws in that said that the local government could not restrict some of these sizes. I think it was sizes of lots, right? Because the local was saying, hey, we need these lots to be a certain size. And then obviously the state's coming in saying, well, if you have to make it that big, it's going to be too expensive. Let's create a smaller form factor. Where's your head on, where federal, state, and local comes in?
Right. So I don't have any principles about which level of government is morally superior or anything. So I would just say, to start, like, whatever branch is going to give you more deregulation, that's the branch where I want the power to be at that moment. There is a longstanding argument that at least with local government, you get a lot of variation. That's why we don't have a national housing crisis in America so much as a state by state housing crisis, right? I mean, I think that, housing could still be cheaper in Texas too, but it's not anywhere close to the problem in California. And if we had a national housing policy, it might well be that the whole country would be California, and we wouldn't even be able to point to some outliers that are doing better to learn something. But again, that said, most housing regulation is local. When state governments preempt that stuff and actually remove it, I think that's great. And if the federal government were to go and do something similar to states, I think that would be great too. Of course, there's always stuff where the level itself can just immediately start reforming itself. Like at the federal level, a lot of people think, well, there's really nothing much they do. But of course, there's environmental review. So that's one that's worth pointing out. But the other huge one is that the federal government owns like 20% of the land in the United States. Right. So how about you auction off some of that land? Right. And maybe Mark Zuckerberg will go and buy 50 square miles and turn it into Zuck City, where he will then go and build the city of the future. And like, he could do it. So why not give him a chance? And by allowing people to buy a big concentrated block of government land, that seems like a great approach. And of course, also is great for deficit reduction too.
What do you think for developers and builders who are dealing with some pushback from the community? Do you have any thoughts on the best approach to take when that's happening? Is it more of an education thing of having to like educate the community on certain things, like around how it is beneficial to do the development?
Gee, I mean, if I were actually doing it, honestly, my instinct would just be stealth.
Yeah.
Like just go and try to talk to insiders and say, I really want to do this. And, can we just sort of put it at the very end of the meeting after everybody's gone home? That's honestly, pragmatically, maybe your best bet in terms of what you can do in the longer run. That's where cultivating relationships with people that are sympathetic is a good one. There is, of course, like reaching out and trying to make friends with the people that are likely to oppose you. Like it's not crazy. Like it's probably not going to make anything worse. But probably activists are just beyond redemption, and they will not listen to you or even give you half a chance. They will just dig in with their maximalist thing of like, I don't care what's going to happen. You will not go and touch that bird nest. I don't care if housing is free and we all become zillionaires. That bird's nest matters more to me than everything else in the universe. All right. So if you're dealing with people like that, then it's going to be pretty hard. Another useful thing is trying to go and develop a lot quickly in areas that are new and where they haven't had time for activist groups to form. Right? Yeah. So that's another part of the beauty of decentralization is like, well, where's the weak link? Let's try that. In terms of self-serving things, it's like, all right, well, how about buy copies of my book for every single person and get them to read them, get them in the schools. I mean, it's kind of a joke because I cannot say that reading my book has actually tipped the outcome of any election I know of. I mean, I think of this as much more of a long-term project. Another reason why I wrote it in this graphic novel format was so that I'd get younger readers who will eventually grow up, and get them young is, I think, a good idea. Just get young people to realize that the government is strangling a vital industry based upon paranoia and just one-sided pessimism. And the less of that regulation we have, the better.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I liked the format. I liked it. It was a change of pace too for reading the normal style of books that I would read to going to read this, and it did make the topics very easy to digest and everything. So
I appreciate that.
No, very well done.
That's what I was going for.
Yeah. You made a point about a lot of the people who will maybe go to the city council meetings or the zoning meetings and speak up against certain developments that are happening in their community. From a lot of the people I've talked to in the building and development industry, it does seem like it's a pretty small number of people that have a big impact on stopping things is what I hear. So, and I would guess you're absolutely right that you're not going to talk them into changing their mind. Yes. And so, so it does become like, what's the solution to get around some of the opinions of these very few people that are holding up all the projects and the improvements of their community?
Yeah, I mean, just to fight fire with fire, if you could just get all your workers, all your contractors, your financiers, get them all to show up at the meeting too, and say, look, this is not just one greedy guy trying to go and build something. It's everybody associated with the project. and then say, and by the way, do you know who's not here, but we should be thinking about? The consumers. Right? They don't know that they don't know they're going to be the consumers yet. They're probably not going to be even aware of the project until it's done, but they exist. They're human. Why don't they count?
Yeah, you said something earlier that is pretty funny that it's like this, and I never really thought about it. And that's about a lot of the evil villains in movies are real estate developers.
Yeah, totally. And
Yeah, what's up
Scooby
with
Doo, of
that?
course. Scooby
Yeah,
Doo.
what is up with that? That's crazy that
Yes.
that's set up.
Yeah, it is odd. I mean, like I'd say there's probably more evil developers and like evil polluting corporations in movies.
Yeah,
One where it's like with the polluters, you see, all right, well, I understand why people don't like these firms with the smokestacks, but why are you so mad at someone building houses?
yeah. Do you think there's ever a reason to not do a development?
Hmm. Well, I mean, obviously, one is that your consumers may actually want to have some empty space for recreation and you want to leave that space there, and it raises the value of the community, means you can sell at a higher price. So that's one of the pretty obvious ones. And then just leaving room for, for swimming pools and that kind of thing. And so there's all that, but probably you're meaning something deeper of, like, does it make, like, especially does it make sense for government to go and just say, this is an historic area, you can't touch it. This is an environmental area, you can't touch it. I totally understand why people have strong emotional reactions to going and bulldozing historic homes or clear cutting a forest. But ultimately I'll say, look, most historic homes are of no interest to anybody except a few architectural historians. And most of nature actually will not be enjoyed by anyone ever. People don't care about it. So a lot of what's going on with the regulation is bait and switch, where you basically say, if you don't want the Statue of Liberty to get blown up, then you need to go and support every kind of historic building regulation. And similarly, like if you don't want to go and clear cut the great sequoias, then we should go and not be able to go and cut down any trees. And it's like, yeah, that doesn't really follow at all. And
Right.
when you think about it further, it's like, well, if someone did own the Statue of Liberty, would they blow it up? And it's like, no, it's like a giant tourist attraction. Same thing for the sequoias. So I'd say the stuff that is worth preserving, you don't need regulation to preserve it. You just need someone to own it to go and make some money charging people for it. And that's a great system. No one's worried Disneyland is going to get bulldozed because people love Disneyland.
Yeah, well, that's what we talk about on here. We've had people come on and talk about how the market's going to decide whether the project that you do is terrible or whether
Mm-hmm.
it's something that they actually want to come in and purchase. And if a developer comes in and does something that nobody wants to buy, well, they're going to go out of business. And it's not,
Yeah.
they're not going to build any more of those bad developments or the
Yes.
developments that go a bad path and everything. So it does seem like the market will kind of work itself out if you allow the developers to, the freedom to actually do some of the developments they're being asked to do.
Yeah, I'm an economist, so I know a lot of economists will say, well, those developers aren't considering the harm to neighbors and that kind of thing. And I'll say, you're right. They probably aren't considering the harm to neighbors. You know what else they aren't considering? All the help they're giving to neighbors. And we should go and sum those two. Even things as simple as neighbors move in and they've got kids and they could become your kids' friends. They could become your friends too. But I mean, if you are a parent, having kids within walking distance is especially wonderful. There was
Yeah.
a giant new development near me where they put like 50 new homes all within walking distance. And it did actually mess up my life a bit because there was extra traffic and especially a lot of noise for a couple of years. But the whole time I was saying, if one kid moves into this neighborhood that becomes friends with one of my kids, and then I don't need to drive them to their friend's house anymore, it will all have been worth it. It's a totally reasonable point. As it turned out, it didn't work out for me, and my kids didn't make friends with anyone there. But they could have. It's not
Yeah.
like this wasn't like total wishful thinking. It was a reasonable hope. It just didn't happen to come to fruition in this case. But it's a reasonable thing to think about. Yeah, what are the upsides? And there's always upsides of construction, which basically never get brought up at a meeting. Maybe tax revenue, extra property tax revenue, but just saying having more houses here means that it's less likely that our grocery store will go bankrupt because they need more customers to stay in business. It's a very good point.
Yeah, there's an example of that someone talked about on the show was down in Austin, Texas. There was a multifamily development that was being proposed to be built, and the community was like really against it. And the road that went through, or that the road that led into the multifamily unit, if they didn't do this multifamily project, it was going to be a through street. And so it was going to be one of those things where they're going to have a lot more traffic coming through their
Ah,
communities from a very busy, I think it was a restaurant or a place where a lot of like music is played and things like that. And so it ended up being a scenario where they the community supported it because it was going to keep that from happening. So it was like an either or type deal. And so they ended up supporting it. So that was kind of the positive of doing the development to them, ended up
Right.
being that it was going to actually lower the traffic coming through their area from outside people.
Yeah, I mean that. I mean, so I mean that's true too. I mean that's a case where it makes it sound like it's the lesser of two evils, and that versus an actual positive good on balance. I mean,
Right.
think about like almost anything good has a downside. You win a free car, and you could start saying, "Oh my God, I'm going to get insurance for it. I'm going to need maintenance. Maybe it'll get stolen. Like, where will I park it?" And it's like you're getting a free car. Net positive, man. It doesn't need to be an improvement in every possible way. Think about the package. It's a good package, so celebrate instead of belly aching.
So when you look ahead and you think about, I don't know, 10 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
do you think it's more likely that the cost of homes will become more affordable,
Hmm.
or that we will go the other direction where there will be even more red tape?
Yeah. Adjusting for inflation, I think that prices are going to come down a little bit, say like 3%. So it's not going to be a huge amount, but it will be something. So, and again, especially in areas where they've had heavy regulation and they're moving away. So I think prices in California, I wouldn't be surprised if adjusting for inflation, those came down by 10% in the next 10 years, something like that. And then maybe even more in the highest price areas, Bay Area, Los Angeles, San Jose. I don't think that this is going to spread like wildfire. There obviously there's always a little bit of hope. Maybe this will just be such a great demonstration or proof of concept, but I always try to keep a strict separation between what I want to happen and what I predict will happen.
Yeah, something that someone had pointed out on the show as well before was the as prices have gone up over time. Obviously, there's the inflation
Mm-hmm.
side of it, but
Yeah.
as prices have gone up, also something that they were correlating to it was that the size of homes also has gone up
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit
Yeah.
from 50s, 60s all the way to today, where things just drastically got larger, and it makes you wonder if that's also a part of the path that developers can get to, is some smaller homes that are just going to be more affordable from that standpoint alone.
Right. I mean, often the regulation just says they can't build smaller ones. But the other thing is, like, people are a lot richer than they were in the 50s. If you want
True.
to go and live in a cheap home, you can go and find an unimproved home from the 50s and buy it. And you probably wouldn't want to live there because they just were settling for so much worse. Important to understand that there's something called the Case-Shiller Index, where the whole idea is that you're looking at the prices of identical homes over time. Of course, that isn't fully factoring in. Maybe you put in better carpet or something, but it's really trying to do a very close comparison. And even by that measure, housing prices have risen a lot more than inflation. So it's not merely that we're getting better houses. It's actually that we really are strangling housing and the housing industry, and prices are higher as a result.
Well, I guess on the positive side, so to kind of talk about some positive things, are there any were there any things that you've seen happen around the country that gives you hope that we're maybe getting more attention on this, or we're heading in a better direction?
Yeah. So CEQA reform in California is the last big one. There are a bunch of places that have limited or ended single family zoning. California passed a law saying you can subdivide single family homes. There are enough additional conditions on that I don't think that one deregulation will matter very much, but it's still a modest step in the right direction. I mean, honestly, the main thing that just gives me hope is just knowing not all places are California. So you do have places like Texas and Florida. And even in Texas, sometimes when I talk in Texas, people say, "Oh, you don't understand. Austin has terrible regulation." And it's like, no, first of all, it's not terrible compared to California. And second of all, if you drive from Austin to San Antonio, when you're in the middle, you will be able to find palatial homes for like $400,000. So even if the actual downtowns are heavily regulated, you can be within commuting distance of those downtowns and still get a really great house for an affordable price. So it's not the case that the whole country's messed up. So that's where I would just get a lot of my hope, is just saying, like, if you're flexible about where you live, then you don't have to go and suffer so much.
Well, super interesting. I guess last thing here, just wrapping up. What's the best way for people to connect with you or learn more about you and pick up a copy of your book?
Right. So easiest is to buy Build Baby Build on Amazon. You know the story, but you can get it lots of other places. I also have a Substack called Bet on It, where I talk about housing, but lots of other subjects. I mean, basically, I'm someone that finds the world fascinating. Lots of topics fascinate me. And I focus basically exclusively on controversial topics. I don't write anything on any topic where I have a conventional view. I do have some normal views, but that book's already been written. I don't write books defending a normal view. I try to find views that I think really deserve to get a lot more attention, but aren't getting it, and then take it over and see what I can do with it, run with it.
Awesome. Well, you guys listening in right now, if you look down in the description for this episode, you'll see the links there to pick up a copy of his book and get over to his Substack and everything. Bryan, really appreciate you joining, digging into some of
Absolutely.
these topics. It's
All right.
greatly needed. And with that said, we'll go ahead and come to a close here. Appreciate you all for joining in, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Thank you very much, Ryan Glick. And the book is Build Baby Build. Thanks a lot.